Hey everybody, my name is Jack, and I'm here with Pastor Rob from the United Methodist Church in Jackson, Minnesota. And what is the sermon going to be about today?
Well, good morning, Jack. Good to see you on this Memorial Day weekend. It's going to be about Memorial Day. You know, we think of Memorial Day weekend as a day and a weekend to have off. It's usually the first weekend of summer and different activities. People go to the lakes for the first time during the summer, but we need to take some time to think about what Memorial Day is, remembering the fellows and the women that died in service of our country. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
As you're being seated this morning, I invite you to take your Bibles and turn them with me to John chapter 8, verses 31 to 36. I'm just going to read this passage and refer to it kind of toward the end of the time here this morning. But I just want to share some thoughts with you on Memorial Day and what's led me to this place today. John chapter 8, beginning with verse 31 and reading down to verse 36. Jesus said to the people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." "Well, we are descendants of Abraham," they said. "We have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean you will be set free?" Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is part of the family forever. So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A couple of weeks ago, I had driven the baseball team, the Jackson County Central baseball team, to Redwood Falls. It was. We were at Redwood Falls, and the coach asked me to keep the pitch count. I don't know if you do this, but in high school baseball, and I'm glad they do this. And I don't know, is it the same true in softball? We don't know if they have an Erin plays softball. That's why I'm looking at her grandmother. She would know. But in baseball, they have a pitch count, and so the boys can only pitch so many pitches in a game in so many days before they can pitch again and that kind of thing. And it's all very official. You have to send in your pitch counts to the conference, whatever, and everything. And so we were keeping the pitch count. And so I'm sitting in the dugout with the boys, with the baseball players, and one of the baseball players makes a comment about World War II. I think in Redwood Falls, I think the reason he made the comment was because the memorial for the Veterans Memorial in Redwood Falls is somewhere close by the baseball field. And so they were commenting something about World War II. And the comment that this young baseball player made was, "Oh, those people are all dead. All the people that were affected by World War II were all dead." And I'm going, wait a second. My dad was 10 years old when the war started. My dad. And the baseball player went, "Your dad? Not your grandpa? Your dad?" "Yes, my dad. And he lived in occupied Holland." He went, "What? Holland, Michigan?" No, Holland, Michigan was not occupied. Holland, Minnesota, maybe. No, not Holland, Minnesota. Holland, the country. "Really? Well, you've never been there." "Excuse me? I was born there, sonny." And this got me thinking. And then, not long after that, there was, I think on the Discovery Channel or someplace, there was a show of the POWs, about POWs that had been prisoners of war and friends that they had lost. And in that show, there was a pair of boots, combat boots, with a picture of a young man. And I could have sworn that young man looked like all of the high school baseball players. He wasn't that much older. And that's all that was left. was a pair of combat boots. And then my mind went to Marino Hannison. He was a fellow from Hensel, North Dakota. Anybody know where Hensel, North Dakota is? No, you probably don't. It's the size of Alpha, Minnesota, maybe a little smaller than Alpha, if there can be a town smaller than Alpha, Minnesota. It is that small. Marino Hannison grew up on a farm near Hensel, Minnesota, or North Dakota. I'm getting confused. And Marino grew up on a farm, and he was an Icelander. You ever meet people from Iceland? That area of North Dakota, kind of the northeast corner, there was an immigration flux of people from Iceland. The Icelandic State Park is up there. They call the golf course the Iceland Golf Club, and everything up in that area of North Dakota. Well, his family, with a name like Hannison, they're Icelanders. And at the age of 18, he got drafted into the Army Air Corps. And he went to Minneapolis, then to Georgia or Mississippi or someplace. And he gets assigned to one of the Flying Fortress bombers. And during the course of the Second World War, he gets shot down. Survives. He and another friend even though he parachuted out, he didn't see his friend, but he found out later that his friend survived. He found out later because Marino parachuted down into Belgium, and he did what his training did. He started heading a certain direction. But after 3 days, he was getting kind of hungry, hiding out in the forests of Belgium. And so he approached a cottage in the middle of a clearing, a cabin there. And he watched for most of a day, didn't see any abnormal activity. And that evening, he decided to approach the front door. And through a rough translation of English, he made it say, I'm an American, I'm in trouble, I need help. And the farmer guy, or the head of the household, left in the middle of the night. And Marino said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to end up spending the rest of the war in a prisoner of war camp. And then within an hour or two, the farmer, the head of the household, comes back with a priest. And the priest says, follow me. And so he brings him into the forest and brings him to the Belgian resistance group in the area. And there he finds his best friend from the airplane, who has also been saved. And for the next 2 years, these kids, one of them from North Dakota, his best friend was from Minnesota someplace. For the next 2 years, they drive trucks for the Belgian resistance, because even though the resistance has trucks, nobody knows how to drive. These kids that grew up on farms in Minnesota and North Dakota know how to drive anything. And so they drive trucks for the resistance. Their mission was basically blowing up trains and railroad tracks to stop the Germans or slow down the Germans. And they would, and Marino said their job was, they would stop a train, get everybody off the train, strip them naked, and tie them to trees. Because if you killed any Germans, the Germans would then get 10 Belgians or whatever for every German you killed. So they actually stripped them naked so they couldn't do anything, and then tied them to trees, blew up the train, and then Marino and his best friend, they drove the getaway vehicles. And so that's what they did for 2 years. He makes it back to England after the war. All this time, his family's been told, of course, that he's a POW. And he makes it back to England. He meets with George Patton and some of the other high-ranking generals that are now famous. You always see in movies and everything. And then goes back to St. Paul, Minnesota. Is discharged in 1945 or something, like 44, one of those. And he drives back to Hensel, North Dakota. Never gets on an airplane again. Except for the time, and then on July 4th, 1993, I do his funeral service. July 4th, 1993. And I think of Marino Hansen, a young kid, his best friend, a young kid. And that's what Memorial Day is. It's not just a holiday at the lake. It's not just a family picnic. It's not even the observance that the VFW does, or the parade downtown. Memorial Day is remembering those young kids. I bet you know some kids like that too. I had, I've told you that the Jackson class of 1965, Mary is part of them, so is Mark and Nancy. They kind of adopted me and made me their mascot and everything. Their class, though, I heard from them, their class, though, they had people serve in Vietnam. People who gave their lives in Vietnam. People that were not much older, 18, 19 years old maybe, 20 tops. And you think about these. And then this last week, I decided, okay, I'm going to find out a little bit more about this place in Holland where I come from. The northern part of Holland, I wish we had a map up here. I'd show you. If you get a map in your mind, it's on the northwest side of Holland, as north as you can get. If you look at a map of Holland, off the coast of Holland, coming out from Germany, there's a series of islands. And we're like the second island over and right there. and it's interesting. The one island is Dutch, and the first island is German. And the little town that my dad was raised in, where I was born, where my dad's whole family was from, Althauser Maiden, Uithuzermeden. Spell that 3 times fast. And this little town, right in the northern part of Holland. And so I thought, what happened during the war? Well, my dad and his brothers and sisters never really talked about it. Never really said anything until my mom and I went last year to Holland to see the tulips and everything, because Mom had never really, back in the 1960s, they didn't raise tulips in that part of Holland. So she never really saw the fields of tulips. And so I said, let's go to around Amsterdam, the southern part of the country, and let's look at the tulips. But as we spent time there with our family, we also got to talking with Mom's or with Dad's brother, who we were visiting with and staying with, and his sister, and we realized, we heard some stories. We heard some stories about how my grandfather, Opa, during a time when the Germans were shelling, what they would do is they would send shells from that island out on the North Sea over the village into the city of Groningen when they were first taking it over. And what they would do is some of those shells would land short. And they would fall in the village where we lived, where we were from. And my grandfather's leg was all shot up and full of shrapnel. And they had to walk 2 miles to the nearest hospital. And they came to a canal where there was a boat in the canal that was a military boat. And it was vacated. There was nobody there. And they were going, what in the world has happened here? You're going, the Germans always had boats with people in them patrolling the canals and making sure everybody was behaving themselves. And there was nobody there. And so my uncle, my dad's brother said, we snuck onto the boat and took all their stuff. And that was his story. Forget my dad with his shrapnel on his leg. We got on that boat, we stole all their stuff. That was the things they remember. And the time the people they were scared of my uncle said, were not the Germans. The people they were scared of were the informers. Because do you remember older people who lived through World War II? Remember rationing books and you could only have so much. Of course, they had them in Europe, where there was hardly any food. We had I had my grandfather's ration books that the family still had. But when we left, because my dad had died a couple of years ago, my mom said, "Hey, those really belong to his family, so give them back to Uncle Wim." I said, "Really? Come on! I don't hold on to these. These are history." So, but I gave them to my Uncle Wim. But anyway, the interesting thing was that if you needed bread, you could go to the Germans and say, "Hey, I know something about the Andersons over here. If I can get an extra ration of bread, I'll tell on them." And so those were the informers. Those were the people that the Dutch people were really afraid of. People in Holland living through the war. It's something that we've never had to do, really. Something that never really impacted us as Americans. But living in that condition on Memorial Day, that's also who I remember. I remember the people who we freed. And yet, I say who we freed. I hate to tell you this, but it wasn't the Americans that freed my village. It was the second, I wrote this down, it was the 2nd Canadian Corps, the 2nd Division, that freed Northern Holland. They actually took over that island when they were invading, when they were coming to liberate Holland. Their chore was to liberate Northern Holland. And on one of the websites for the 2nd Division, 2nd Canadian Corps, they called themselves the Sloggers because it was slogging through places. On the radio they could hear the liberation of Paris, and everybody was, "Yay! The Americans have liberated Paris, and how great this is!" These Canadians are slogging through marshlands, lowlands, because the Germans on their retreat have broken all the dikes and the water has flooded in, and they're all, because they want to slow the Allied advances. And so these sloggers come through the different villages and fighting, building the building with people. And that's what I remember. The people who gave their lives so that I could be here. The idea that without those people, I wouldn't be here. My dad would not have made it to America, would not have made it to meet my mom, and it took my mom and my dad to get together for me to meet that here. That's the way biology works. And so those people, those Canadians, I know now why my dad, in his internet business, he sold scroll saw blades throughout the country, actually throughout the world over the internet. And everything. Whenever he had a customer from Canada, he said, "It's half price. Everything, free shipping, but also half price." And I remember one time listening to him on the phone, talking to one of his Canadian customers, and they were asking him, because they always put it on speakerphone. He said they were asking him, "Why are you doing this? I mean, what's the special?" He said, "Because you saved my country." And it was always, and I've seen that in advertisements too, that the Canadians and the Dutch have a special relationship because of that. And on Memorial Day, I remember that. And then I remember the movie Private Ryan. Remember the Saving Private Ryan movie? I remember, I just can't get the picture of these kids out of my mind. And the great line in that movie where the soldiers in the unit that are with the Tom Hanks character, with the Captain Miller, and they ask him, "Captain, why are we doing this? We're 6 to 7 guys traipsing through Europe to save one guy who's not a famous general, who's not a, he doesn't have some secret coded book that we have to recover or anything. He's just one person. And Tom Hanks says, I'm doing it because if this one mission will get me home, then it's worth it. He's doing it for freedom. And that's where this passage of Scripture comes in. John chapter 8. He's doing it for freedom, for the people for himself, for the rest of his company, the rest of his squad, the rest of the people that are marching with him. And yes, Sam can tell us, and I know Sam's in the Navy, but he can tell us about marching and how the other people who've been in the Army and Marine Corps. You don't march like they did in that movie, with silhouetted against the fields, where somebody can pick you off very easily and everything. You wouldn't do that. But there are parts of that movie where you just think, this is what it's all about. It's about freedom. The fact that we can be here, that we can be gathered together. That's what Memorial Day is really all about. It's about remembering those young men and women. And even today, some of the saddest pictures that you'll see, I saw on Facebook somebody was sharing yesterday and the day before, a very sad picture of a widow curled up in front of one of the white crosses at Arlington or one of the other military cemeteries, and she's crying. There's also another picture that I love where a widow has brought her son, and they've spread out a blanket and they're having a picnic in front of one of the white crosses. A young man has died in Iraq or Afghanistan. And you go, that's not our freedom. That's not somebody. I mean, that wasn't a declaration of war. We'll talk to all the Korean War veterans about that one too, or Vietnam for that matter. And yet, here these young men go and give the last full measure of devotion for their country. For freedom. They represent us and what we believe. And they gave what they had so others could be free. Something to think about, isn't it? Let's pray together. Our Lord God, our Heavenly Father, on this Memorial Day weekend, on this Memorial Day, we think about all of the young men and women throughout the ages, throughout the years, throughout the wars. We've seen pictures, Lord, of faceless bodies face down on beaches. We've seen pictures of battlefields, whether it be Shiloh or Lexington and Concord, or whether it be the beaches of Normandy or Belgium in the Battle of the Bulge. And we think of the young men and women. We think of the people who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. Lord, we thank you for their sacrifice. They represent us and what we believe as United States citizens. As people who Lord, you know us, we don't always agree on every issue, but we can agree on freedom. We can agree on the gift that you give to us, the ability to come to worship in a Methodist church, in a Lutheran church, in a Baptist church, in a Presbyterian church, at a Catholic church. We can come together and thank the Lord, thank you, God, for bringing us together. For bringing us together to send our young people out on a mission trip, representing us, to tell others about you. You do all of that because these young men and women gave their lives for us. Thank you, Lord. Bless the families. Bless the friends. Bless those impacted by loss during this time, whether it be wounded warriors or those that gave their lives. Lord, help us to thank them and spend time in remembrance and thanks. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. A great